Good morning, good day, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, everyone, for ICC Week 12. This is our final video lesson. After this, we are meeting face to face, which I am super excited about. And so, I hope you are as well. So this week is going to be a bit of a mishmash, but we've got the very important material to take care of. Discussing our final project, because that final presentation is going to be a synthesis of all of what we've learned so far. Talking about the different parts of speeches and utilizing that, while also using symbolism and explaining reasoning. Most all the projects and work we've had will be utilized in this final project, so quite exciting for that as well. And then it'll be in person. So, we'll see how it is. So, we're going to talk this week. We'll talk about our final project. And then week 13, it's going to be a workshop class in person. So I can see what we're doing. We can all meet each other. And I can provide direct feedback on your projects. We're going to start the projects in groups this coming week, so you can start brainstorming about what you need to do, what to talk about. So when we get to week 13, you'll be making and producing. So that'll be important. And then weeks 14 and 15 will be presentations. All exciting stuff. All right. So right now, you're still preparing your flag short videos. And that's talking about symbolism and meaningful symbols about your chosen flag. Your final project has to do with money, another conveyance of national expression. So we're going to talk about it. Money is one of the ways that countries show what's important to them. They can show important people, whether they be historical ones or idealistic or fictional, but things that they express the ideals of that country, of who they are and what the country aspires to be. And there's also symbols of the country, art, great works of art, or scientific achievement, or beautiful scenery, or historic scenes. These are all things that countries put on money to show who they are. Example here. $1 and $2 bills from the United States. These are nice examples because there are a lot of details here. Number one, the $1 bill. We've got a picture of this guy who looks a bit angry. That's and underneath we can see Washington. That's George Washington. He was the first president of the United States. He's called the father of the United States. And most people like him. Some people don't like him anymore, but he is very symbolically important. So he's on the $1 bill. And on the back, though, they still have a lot of important symbols. They have the symbol of the United States, and there's a lot of detail in there. There's the bald eagle, national animal of the United States, holding an olive branch, which means peace, then holding a bunch of arrows, which means war, which is, that's something. And then it's in its mouth, it's holding the national slogan, the motto of the United States, E pluribus unum, out of many, one. There we go. And over here, the Novus Ordo Seclorum and Anut Septius, we've got a pyramid, and then above the pyramid, we've got the top of the pyramid is an eye that's shining. It's kind of magical. And that's called the all-seeing eye. And it's about knowledge. It's a symbol of knowledge underneath, and it's because the pyramid has long been not a mystical symbol, but an idyllic symbol of knowledge, because it takes intelligence to build a pyramid, and this is a symbol of knowledge, which is what every country really wants. So the $2 bill has another president called Thomas Jefferson. He is another famous president, a very unhappy man there too, but he did a lot of things. On the back, though, we don't have symbols. We have a recreation of an important event, and this is the signing of the Declaration of Independence down here in 1776. Is where America starts counting its history as the United States. And the Declaration of Independence is a long letter written from the United States by all these guys who are representatives from their different places, written to the King of England saying, we want to break up with you. And that's what it is. And they give reasons why. And the author of that letter was Thomas Jefferson. So he's an important author, an important writer in American history. He helped write very important documents that are still very important today. He played a huge role in writing the American Constitution, which set the rules for American presidential elections, which is still kind of happening right now. So he's halfway to blame for all the craziness that we've seen now. But these are important. This is a very important historical event. This is the founding of America. And this is the guy who wrote the letter. So these are important people to the history of America, and important symbols, meaningful symbols, and important events. Even then, we can see here is another example of a different country, and looking at it, it should be obvious, I think, what country it is based on its symbol and on the name. But this is the 100 pounds from Egypt, and on one side is in English, and on the other side is in Arabic. So on the English language side, we see the Sphinx, an important symbol of Egypt, obviously, and then we have the ancient hieroglyphics, because the Egyptians today, they claim ancient Egypt as part of their heritage, so it's important for them, and it's an important part of their history, of their identity as well. But that's old Egypt. I'll say modern Egypt, more modern Egypt, it is an Arabic country as well, and then also it's a Muslim country. This is a mosque, and so this is expressing of who they are and who they were, and that's both part of their identity, culturally, politically, and it's important that who they are now and who they were, because your past is an important component of who you are today. So the money of Egypt reflects that. All right, this is all Vietnam, and who is this is a interesting thing in that Vietnam, we can see got this guy, this guy, this guy. Here he is from the side. They're all the same guy. It's Ho Chi Minh, who is the effective father of the current government, the current nation of Vietnam. He fought for Vietnamese independence for most of his entire life. Since he went to Paris in 1918 to talk in the Paris Peace Conference to argue for Vietnamese independence, that it should be independent from France. And then when he wasn't let inside, he went back and started shooting, basically, armed insurrection, he started fighting the French. Then he fought the Japanese when the Japanese invaded. Then he fought the French again. Then he fought the Americans. And then he fought the Chinese, because the Chinese had to come in and try to do some silliness. So he spent about 50 years. He actually died partway through, but Vietnam spent about 50 years fighting the French, the Americans, the Chinese, and the Japanese at different times, just to have their own country and to run their own country more specifically. They also fought some Koreans there too, but that's a different part of history. But he's on all their money, which is something that's not usual. Usually you put different people on different money. And even North Korea, they put Kim Il-sung and happy, smiley children and workers and things like that. So it is something that is a bit unusual about Vietnam. But in the different scenes here, we see these are soldiers walking around up through the scenery. And in the lower right here, we see soldiers, pushing cannon, artillery. So the fighting was in an important part of their current identity. You spend 50 years doing something. It's an important part of who you are. So these are important symbols of it. And also you'll notice that each bill is a different color. If you go back to America, American bills are basically the same color. And now they're starting to get a little different, but for a long time they all looked in this style, and it was a bit confusing to if you're counting money. So it's something that you might want to think about as we move along. Here we've got two other examples. One historic. Well, it's both historic. This is the Bank of Poland, the National Bank of Polski, Poland, and this is from 1982, when Poland was a communist country. But even then, they were still proud of who they were and who they are. If you can think, who's the most famous Polish person you know of? Who's the most famous Polish man? Or person, man or woman? If I'm asking you, and unless you have already read his name, you might not think of anyone immediately. But this is Nikolai Copernicus, or Copernic. He was a scientist at the time, and he came to the realization, the discovery, that we can see here, that the Earth goes around the sun, not the sun going around the Earth. He came about with the heliocentric model of the universe, and that was really big news. And he was the first European to publish and write things down about it. I don't know if he was the first to actually think of it, but he was the first to write down scientifically and explain what was going on. And Poland is a very proud country, but if you ever look at a map of Poland, you'll see they're between two other countries. To the west, they have Germany. And if I ask you to think about German things, you could probably think of some things. German people, famous Germans, German food, all those things. And then to the east, there's Russia. And Russia's really big if you look at the map. And Russia also has a lot of famous, Russia's famous for many things as well. Poland is very proud, and Poland has its own accomplishments, but it's stuck between two very big cultural giants, so to speak. So they are very proud of Copernicus for good reason, because he figured this out first about the Earth going around the sun. He'd figured it out before Germans, who are supposed to be smart, figured out before the French, the Italians. The Polish were the first ones to figure this out, and so they're very proud of that fact. And so they put him on the money. And so there you go. Good for them. On this side, this is an interesting choice example. This is a $5 bill from the Confederate States of America. The Confederate States of America was a country for about 4 years, and they fought against the United States. They wanted to be their own country because they wanted to own slaves. That's the main reason that they seceded from the United States. And so this is the president of the Confederate States, and this is Athena. But so we're seeing the symbology of who the current leader is, and old Greek mythology figure trying to connect to an older heritage that doesn't really connect there, but they're trying to create that connection. All right, here we go. Now we're into something more familiar. This is the 50,000 won bill of Korea. It says right there. And we've got 50,000 won. We've got 50,000 won. And we've got the good mother right there. And some of her art behind as well. Of Shimsan Indang. So, why was she chosen? Why was she, well, for 50,000, why was she chosen? That's something that I want you to think about. Versus, on 10,000, it's Sejong Daewang. Why was he chosen? What did he do? And what's this behind him? And look to the left here. What do these dots mean? And here, what do these 3 dots mean? That's something I want you to think about. And if you can, or if you want to, look it up and try to see. Because your project has to do with Korean money. As we get into it, if Korea were to make a 20,000 won bill, who should be on it? What should be on it? And that's your project. You're going to design and present and propose a 20,000 won bill, the front and the back. So should Lee Seung-man be on the front? Some people say no. Some people say yes. But that's for debate. Should Park Gi-moon be on it? Should Kim Gu be on it? So, should Yoo Kwon-soon be on the bill? Now, these aren't your 4 choices. These aren't your only 4 choices. You are free to choose anyone. It can be historic. It can be mythological. It could be Dangun. It could be anyone. But your main job is to explain why. It could be Pororo. It could be Jordy, the little he's a kind of dinosaur from the Nini's thing. You just need to explain why. That's the important part. So with your group, you're going to present designs for a new Korean banknote, the 20,000. You'll need to decide who will be the face of it and design the other aspects, the front and the back. This is important. You're designing the front and the back. You'll need to present that as well. And all of you should have about equal speaking time. You'll be working with groups of about 4 to 5 students, so you're not talking for very long. And really, you should be going for about closer to 10 minutes. So you'll be speaking about 2 minutes each. We'll begin presenting on week 14. The week 13 will be our workshop, so I can see how we're doing. And we're going to start using Discord this coming week. In week 12, so you can start brainstorming with each other. So you start brainstorming. So what are you going to be graded on? Your voice, delivery, speech components. Those are your introduction, transition, your conclusion, your body language, all those parts of the actual performance. You'll be graded on that. Your reasoning of your choices. Your actual choice is not important. I mean, you can choose anything. You can choose yourselves. If you want to put yourselves on the money, great. That's wonderful. You want to put BTS on the money? Fine, that's fine. But you need to be able to explain it. Your explanation is the important part for me. That's what I care about. That you're able to explain your reasoning. Why should you be on the new money? In that way, your clarity of your explanation, how understandable is it? Understandable? Is it sensical? And then also, how well do you work together? How well do you work together in preparation, over Discord, in the workshop session? And how well do you work together in your presentation yourself? How well do you transition between each other? So that will be a factor. Also, there'll be a self-evaluation, which is your self-evaluation. We'll talk about this in more detail, but your self-evaluation is a moment for you to be honest with yourself after your presentation about how you did and how your efforts were. And you'll need to think about what you did well, what parts you didn't do well, and if there's some parts you didn't do well on, what can you do in the future to make them better? Saying you did everything perfectly isn't going to be helpful. If you don't get a higher score on this section by saying you did everything perfectly. That's not it. You're not grading yourself for the final grade. You're being honest with yourself so that you can judge yourself and improve yourself. You need to be your harshest judge so that you can be better. So we'll walk through that a little bit next time, just so I hope it can be more valuable to you. All right. This is the explanation of the main of what remains for us. There'll be additional sections to this video, but that is the main project for the rest of the semester. I'm really excited. I've done this project before with in-class presentations, and it's always been better than my expectations. I am super excited about this. All right, we'll see you next time. Hello, this is part 2. This is an addendum for our week 12 video lesson. Because of the change in schedules and all that stuff, and us having a in-person class, we're not going to have a lot of time to get into accents or different dialects of English for weeks 13, 14, and 15. We'll be busy with other things, more important things, but it is nice to talk about global Englishese. We often have the mistaken assumption that that English is English, and that's just not true. English, there's different kinds of English, not just different accents of English, but different syntax and grammars as well. And so it's something that we should acknowledge at least. This lecture mostly focuses on the two big types of English, what we call General American English, GAE, and RP, which is received pronunciation. That's the Queen's English, so to speak, in from the UK. So American and British English. But if you were to if you ever watch British television, you'll notice that there's many different kinds of accents. And so RP is the rich person's British English. General American English is what you see on the news. If you watch CNN and how they talk, that is General American English. But people speak English differently all over. But we'll talk about these differences. So there's an old saying that America and Britain are two nations divided by a common language. There's a lot. It's mostly in vocabulary, but they do have differences. So a lot of different word choice is different. British people call that the front part of the car that goes up and down. They call that the bonnet, and Americans call it the hood. The back part where you put things in, Americans would call that the trunk, and British people call it the boot. It's fine. Americans go on vacation, British people go on holidays. New Yorkers live in apartments, Londoners live in flats. Same thing, different words. Lots of examples. Some are more famous. Chips and fries differences. Potato chips and crisps differences. Biscuits and cookies. And they're, in fact, here. British, they use the word biscuit. Americans, we use cookie to talk about the, Oreo, for example. Americans have biscuits as well, but those are a different thing. Savory scones. Boot and trunk. Chips, French fries or fries. Crisp, potato chips, lorry, a truck. These are the heavy trucks. Or even what we have in Korea, the bonga. That would be a lorry. Motorway versus freeway. The saloon car versus the sedan car. So none of this is terribly, this isn't game changing. This isn't very big. It doesn't take very long to figure out what the person's talking about. But they do have that. Then there are a few grammatical differences, and this is a bit more interesting. Collective nouns. Remember, collective nouns are when we refer to a group of individuals. So, in American English, collective nouns are singular. So, staff for a group of employees, a band for a group of musicians, a team for a group of athletes. So, Americans would say the band is good. But in British English, collective nouns can be singular or plural. Both are correct. So you can say the team are playing tonight. The team is playing tonight. Both are correct in British English. But the team are playing tonight is incorrect in American English. So this is where you can run into trouble on English test if you're using a British English or an American English based test. So it's something to be aware of for your future. Then another difference is auxiliary verbs, the helping verbs. So just to help remind us, they help the main verb by adding information about time, modality, and voice. So the auxiliary verb shall, British people sometimes use shall to express the future. For example, I shall go home now. Americans know what it means, but we don't say it very often because of the perceived formality. So we don't say shall because it seems overly formal, and Americans are famously casual in language. So British people are viewed as a motorcycle club. British people are viewed, at least, as being more formal in their speech, and Americans are less formal in how they talk. So Americans will probably say, I will go home, not I shall go home, but I will go home. In question form, British people would say, shall we go now? But Americans would more probably say, should we go now? When we want to, this is a bit complicated sentence contract. When Americans want to express a lack of obligation, you don't have to do something. We use the helping verb do with a negative followed by need. You do not need to come to work today. You do not need to come to work today. British people like dropping the helping verb and contract not. You needn't come to work today. You needn't come to work today. So Americans would prefer you do not need to come to work today. RP speakers, you needn't come to work today. Two differences there. All right, past tense the verbs. This is a fun one. Small differences with past forms of irregular verbs. So the past tense of learn in American English is learned. Perfectly fine. British people also use the form learnt. So the same rule applies to dreamed, dreamt, burned, burnt, leaned, lent. Americans tend to use the ed ending a lot more. This is we talked about it. I think Merriam-Webster, the guy who made the dictionary, he had a huge role in this. He was American, so he also wanted to make American English. So he formalized a lot of these differences. So using the T ending in American English is not incorrect at all, but it's just not as common. So the past participle form, Americans tend to use the en ending for some irregular verbs. So for example, I've never gotten caught. I've never gotten caught. Whereas a British person would say, I've never got caught. So Americans use both got and gotten in the past participle, but British people only use got. Again, I'm going to say this on every screen, most probably. You can use both, it's fine, but I want you to be aware of the differences between different kinds of English. And so that's why we're talking about this. Because they are, this isn't the differences between, like modern English and old English. You are completely mutually intelligible, as in people can understand each other with no problem. British people and American people and Canadians and Australians and South Africans and Indians and things like that. We can understand each other most of the time. But there's a how should I say this? An arrogance. That's pretty much what it is. That British people tend to have that, because Americans are dumb, stupid, and fat, that their way of talking is dumb, stupid, and fat. Might be true, but I've met a lot of dumb, stupid, and fat British people as well. So we do not have an exclusive market on those people. Another difference is tag questions. This is where you turn a grammatical statement into a question. For example, the whole situation is unfortunate, isn't it? Or, you don't like him, do you? The tag includes a pronoun and its matching form of the verb to be, have or do. Have you, do you, are you, things like that. Tag questions encourage people to respond and agree with the speaker. It's basically, when you ask a tag question, it's you're expecting a yes answer. Americans use tag questions, but British people really use tag questions. So, another difference there. Spelling gets into it. Well, we're back to Noah Webster. This is where we see the biggest, most obvious difference in spelling of words, and then vocabulary. So, for the longest time, English was a spoken language, but not a written language. And because you had other languages, Latin, and you had French. And English was not the language of the educated class kind of thing. So the spelling of English was not consistent. If you could sound out what the person was saying, then you spelled it correctly. They spelled it correctly, as in the spelling wasn't consistent. But when we started writing things down, especially when we started using the printing press, then it became important to spell things consistently, just so it could take less time. And Noah Webster, in the late 1700s, he really wanted to make things consistent. He liked things to be uniform. And so he also wanted to show that America was independent. So this is why, if you look at American English, we dropped U's. Because the words like color, honor, labor, we don't say the oo of the u there. We don't say color, honor, labor, color, honor, labor. So we dropped the u because to make the spelling match the pronunciation. That was an attempt. There are other words like defense and otherwise just pronunciation. Aluminum versus aluminium. Both are fine. It's all right. Something that we often think is that the differences between American English and British English are exaggerated, as in there's so many differences, but that's just not true. If you understand one, you can understand the other. There are exceptions when we get into regional or subcultural dialects. If you meet a Cockney, chav in London, you're gonna have a hard time understanding them. Or if you go to Scotland and talk to some of the people with the very thick Scottish accents, I have a hard time. And then also, if you go to some parts of America, and you'll have a hard time understanding their accents as well. So it's something that is a factor that I'd like to talk upon a bit this week. If this is our final week with video, I can show you some videos showing different accents, regional accents of English. All right, that is the main differences between the two big Englishes, General American English and received pronunciation of the United Kingdom. All right, we'll see you in the next video. I hope you had a good break, good transition. This is a very, we're gonna go through this for a little bit, talking about different accents, making different sounds. When you take EP1, you're gonna learn about pronunciation, different sounds of English, and and you're going to learn how English speakers talk and produce sounds. And in this video, we're going to look at some different ways that people make different sounds, even though they're speaking the same language. Accents be national, regional, and for lack of a better term right now, I'm going to say subcultural. One thing about accents, everybody has an accent. It is very common that people think however they talk is normal, the correct way, and accents are what other people have, but everyone has an accent. Some people have what we call strong or broad accents. Some people have very flat accents, but we all have one. And some people work hard to lose their accent, lose their native accent. So in this video, we're going to look at some what we call authentic examples, not people playing for the camera, not actors in a movie, even though there is one example of it from a movie, but it's the actors speaking how they grew up speaking. So it's going to be hopefully some interesting examples and just exposing you a little bit to some different kinds of English. In America, this is very common. All these kinds of drink. If you go to California, it's soda. If you go to Seattle, Washington, it's pop. If you go to Atlanta, Georgia, this is Coke. You'll notice there's no Coca-Cola here. But Coca-Cola is from Atlanta, so every soda is a Coke. That's an example. Different regions have different vocabulary for things. We find this less in Korea because of its size. I'm sure back 100, 200 years ago, Korea did have different vocabulary for regional vocabulary. We still see this holding some holdouts with the Jeju dialect, but that's unfortunately that's being assimilated into the greater Korean language. So our first example is a good one. This it's the Boston accent, and I want you to listen for the word car and the word park.
Thank you, Mr. President. I certainly agree with both of my colleagues. And it's not just Cummings Park, it's Car Park, it's Plaisted Park, it's throughout the community. I think at this point, too, I'd like to send an official resolve to the DPW to do not only the cleanup at all these parks, but do a preventative maintenance plan on the top lots as well. They're starting with the nice weather. It's starting to get crowded down there, and I checked with the DPW Parks Department, and they'll only more or less respond to complaints of items that may happen, maybe missing a piece of equipment or something of that nature. I think in the interest of public safety for the children and the families of our community, we should have them in on a Saturday maybe and go through every park in the community and just check them all for safety, as well as start doing the cleanups with the graffiti removal, as well as I know they're getting the baseball fields ready for the upcoming season, but these tot lots are certainly a priority. I know Barry Park has some issues with the tot lot that has to be addressed that was brought to their attention, but a citywide systematic approach, and let's be proactive so that someone doesn't get injured at one of our parks.
Very good.
So there, yeah. Notice he didn't say car, he said car. He didn't say park, he said park. That's how he talked. So he's a city politician, and he's talking about the parks in Boston. So he's like park. The R sound in the Boston accent is heightened and assimilated into an ah thing. So the R becomes ah, and their pitch rises when they say it. Car park. So that's the distinguishing mark of the Boston accent. All right, now. Boston, Massachusetts, and New York City, they're not too far away from each other, but they have different accents. And it used to be, in fact, that the different parts of New York City have very distinct accents. And you can hear this still somewhat. Donald Trump is from Queens, and he speaks with a kind of New York accent, but also He speaks his own way, but he does how he pronounces. But here, this is an older video of city workers arguing with city officials about contract negotiations and how they talk.
No, what I'm saying.
Hold it.
No, wait. It is.
Any equipment in the park department, whether it be in forestry, in shops, or out in the field, the trucks belong to the motor vehicle operators. That's their title in the city of New York, to drive all equipment for the city of New York.
You can hear that with New York is New York, York, York. The York, the sound of New York becomes York, or the elongation and the pitched variation, how it changes within just that short amount of time. That's how they talk. Now, so if you go to New York City, you'll hear some people talk like this, but not everyone anymore.
You have a man getting $13,000 driving a vehicle which is out of title, and a man is sitting down $7,000. That's all he gets for a starting salary. A motor vehicle operator. Why doesn't the city put a motor vehicle operator on that truck for $7,000 rather than have a man that's a qualified tree surgeon, $13,000, riding behind a wheel of a truck, driving a truck? What is he doing that for, Mr. Lord?
Now let's get that straight. Every negotiation.
What do we have motor vehicle operators hired for? What do we have motor vehicle operators hired for? Do we hire forestry men to drive trucks, or do we have motor vehicle operators? Service. We have motor vehicle. That's your interpretation of a crew service. I'll take and show you a truck down there that's 20,000 pounds. That's a motor vehicle operator's a responsibility to drive through a city street.
It is
and you
not.
have to have a professional man behind that wheel.
You're not a professional. Let's get
Who's
something
not a
straight.
professional?
Listen to me.
Who's not a professional?
You're not a
I'm a
professional.
professional driver for the city of New York. I had to take an examination, and I had to pass.
You are a civil servant who took an
qualified-
exam.
Now, Tom Lurie, you know this for a fact. I brought this out before the Department of Personnel 3 years ago when I went to a meeting, and she told me that she was going to look into this and have things taken care of. Not a thing was done. Go around the city of New York and see what's being done in the parks department because of lack of coverage. And you got your laborers that belong in these playgrounds driving the vehicles all over the city of New York. Now get them off the truck.
You know what he's saying?
Save money.
I understand what
and
he's
get the
saying.
place
What do you
straight.
want?
Now,
Wait
a second.
What are you
You
going
know what
to do
he's
about
saying
that?
here? You know what he's saying here? Seriously. It's a beautiful point.
Yeah, I know it's a beautiful
that
point.
productivity
You
works
had a
both
court
ways.
case back in
Productivity,
'66.
Both ways.
Productivity.
Both
Productivity,
ways.
baby. I'm saving you
Both
money
ways.
without productivity. I'm saving you cash.
Beautiful. You
Both
saved me
ways.
money.
I'll save you cash.
Like some of those
Save me
fire
anything.
officers driving in City Hall, double of the MVO guys, and they sit on their ass much better because they got bigger behind.
Right. Yes, that's right. Oh, I watched yours spreading, too.
Well,
I'm
no,
using
no,
it
no,
all
no,
the
no.
time.
These
Let me
are
say
not-
this
I'm
to you.
beautiful.
First of
Come on,
all, as I
Tom.
said before, you don't have it in your contract. Every time you come into negotiations, you want that provision in, and the city will not agree to it.
You got sanitation vehicles, big garbage trucks laying against the wall, not getting anything. They're laying against the wall, Tom. And you got three
Let me
laborers
talk to
that
this
should be in different parks departments working, and you got them running around the city doing
Let
nothing.
me talk to this.
Doing nothing.
I think a very important point is made here. Efficiency and productivity works both ways. Some of the most inefficient practices come from you guys. I don't have to tell you about the high-cost drivers. Joey was just mentioning it to you. Now, it seems to me if we want to get one house in order, we ought to get them all in order. If you don't want him sitting on his duff, we don't want a $13,000 or $12,000 a year man driving the vehicles. Maybe efficiency from your side can match efficiency from our side.
Now, let's go a little further than that. On some of these small agencies, we only have a few MVOs that may drive a commissioner or maybe a deputy. Majority of the time, he's just sitting in the office.
We don't need to watch all of it, but yeah, they're negotiating about city workers. That's a union and the city talking about who to hire and whether the technical experts should have to drive their own cars, because then they can. If not, then they need to hire more drivers. Is what they're talking about. Anyway, but you can hear the New York accent and the Boston accent are different. Also, see, everybody's just smoking. They're smoking cigarettes, cigars, pipes. Everybody's smoking. Ooh, that room must smell bad. But that's the general New York accent. Now, this is a this is a look at the Scottish accent. One of the Scottish accents. Scotland and England, we mentioned previously, Scotland is not England. They speak English because they were colonized. They were taken over by the English. But the Scottish people, their cultural identity hasn't been wiped out, hasn't been exterminated. So, and they're still very proud of being Scottish. Well, they should be. But they speak English with their own variation, their own accent. And this is from a movie called Trainspotting. And I think you should probably know at least one of these actors. But this is how he used to talk when he was younger, and not his Hollywood. Yeah, it's not his Hollywood accent. Oh, there's going to be some bad words in this, because these are naughty boys.
Well, what are you waiting for?
Tommy, this is not natural, man.
It's a great outdoors. It's fresh air.
Look, Tommy, we know you're getting a hard time off Lizzie, but there's really no need to take it out on us.
Doesn't it make you proud to be Scottish?
It's shite being Scottish! We're the lowest of the low! The scum of the fucking earth! The most wretched, miserable, servile, pathetic trash that was ever shot into civilization! Some people hate the English, I don't! They're just wankers! We, on the other hand, are colonised by wankers! Can't even find a decent culture to be colonised by! We're ruled by effete arseholes! It's a shite state of affairs to be in, Tommy, and all the fresh air in the world won't make any fucking difference!
Sorry, man. No, I'm sorry. I appreciate it, Tom.
So you can hear how their accents are different from the two previous ones, and how they talk, how they act is, of course, it's a movie, and these are young men who are in unprofessional setting with friends, versus the professional setting that we saw with the two previous examples. But you can see how they are different. This one gets a bit more interesting. This is F.R. de Klerk, South African English. South Africa is a very interesting. Well, everywhere is very interesting. I want to make that abundantly clear. But South Africa has a significant minority of whites, and for well, it depends on when you start counting. But for a long time, the whites controlled the government, and they were officially a democracy. You could vote if you were white, but most people in South Africa aren't white. It's Africa. Now, so they had what was called a limited democracy, a very limited democracy, in fact. But there are two basic kinds of whites in South Africa: British, from people who came from England, from the United Kingdom, and Afrikaan, and these are Dutch settlers, people from the Netherlands who moved to South Africa hundreds of years ago. And Afrikaans is related to the Dutch language, but they've had enough separation that they're different languages now. So this man, he's a former politician from South Africa when they were still under apartheid, and he's the president, and he was the last white president. So we'll hear his style of English, his accent of English.
Why do you think he did fail to make a lasting agreement in time in Rhodesia?
Well, he had a chance at an earlier negotiation situation. There were proposals on the table in the case of the old Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. The British government was very directly involved in negotiations because it was not an independent country like South Africa. And offers were on the table. I think it was on a ship somewhere, I forgot the name of the ship, which would have put Ian Smith and the whites in the old Rhodesia in a much better position than the final deal he made. but he passed it up and he wanted too much. He wasn't prepared to make painful compromises and concessions. There were some people, there are still some whites today telling me, I gave away too much. As there were blacks until Mr. Mandela's death who said he made too many compromises. Those were the hardliners, and I think Ian Smith himself was a hardliner. He wanted too much. There are some whites who say, I could have negotiated a white veto in a new constitutional system. I never stood for a white veto, because that would be a form of continued racial discrimination in favor of a minority. I stood for checks and balances in the Constitution. I stood for elements and institutions which can prevent the misuse of power, but not for a white veto. And I think what Ian Smith held out for and what he lost in the end was a form of a white veto. But I'm not an expert on the old Rhodesia and on Zimbabwe.
So you can see, English wasn't his first language. Afrikaans was, and if you've ever had a South African teacher, in your middle school or elementary school, and there's a high chance that English wasn't their first language. It was their second language, or maybe even third language. Because South Africa has several different ethnicities and lots of languages, and the population is generally, they're polyglots. They don't speak one language, they speak 3, 4, 5, and they can code switch between. And they often do if you watch television. I tried watching it. I dated a South African for some time, and television was confusing for me because I couldn't speak. Anyways, this brings us into Australia. This guy's great, Steve Irwin. He's a crocodile hunter. He's a fun guy. This is back when he was much younger, before he was famous in America. He speaks with a very broad Australian accent. Some would say a very stereotypical Australian accent. It's very positive, and very cheerful, and you can see how he talks. This is from a children's television show.
The only reason I'm doing this is because this one's a python, and as you see, he won't bite because he can't eat me, and he doesn't feel scared. I don't scare him, so he won't bite, and he hasn't got venom. Now that's a python, but it's very difficult from a distance to tell a python from a. You might have to cut here. He's biting my neck. I'm serious.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Well, if I watch the telly, I should be able to. Can you get a close in on this?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God, look at that.
Oh, he's gonna let go, yep. Perfect.
Did that hurt?
No. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So, that's an example of a broad Australian accent, how he talks. And you can hear that how he called the television, the telly, things like that. And then also, he was talking about how the snake wasn't going to bite him, and then it bit him anyway. And then it didn't hurt. He was fine. So that's an example of the Australian accent. Now, there's variations within, of course, and also New Zealand and Australian accents are different. You might say that they're in the same area, but they're still quite far away from each other. Okay. This one I wanted to show you, Don Cherry. He's an interesting man. He's a retired hockey player. He's a sports commentator now. I think not now. He got fired. Because, you will see what he says. He speaks very directly, very impolitely. He's a middle-aged man, so that's how they talk. So, but the Canadian accent of English does exist, and how Don Cherry talks is a very stereotypical way of how a Canadian man talks. Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, he went to fancy schools. He's educated. how Don Cherry talks is something of how the more average Canadian man would talk. We'll see how that is.
I mean, can I say something about this guy? He's 6'3", 215 pounds, and he comes out and says there shouldn't be fighting in the game. Well, the guy don't
That's
fight.
the first thing Don Cherry can't stand. Namby-pambies who won't fight.
Well, you can provide muscle without taking penalties or fighting.
Oh, yeah, you can provide. Well, look, I'll tell you something.
His opinions reach 3 to 4 million people a week between periods on Hockey Night in Canada. But very few, watch below the belt here, get to jab back.
And I don't.
And then there's...
You can hear there, yeah, how they talk. How that's the Canadian way of talking. Especially once you get out of the major metropolitan cities of Toronto and Vancouver, and start getting into, not rural, suburban. Once you just start getting out of Toronto, and even in Toronto, you'll hear it quite easily about that. But he's a ice hockey commentator, because he was an ice hockey player as well. And ice hockey is the national sport of Canada. It's their sport. It was invented in Canada. And ice hockey traditionally is a very violent sport. And so he's a very old-fashioned person who believes that you should have fighting in it. But you can hear how he talks here.
No wonder they love us. We're weak. We're spineless wimps.
You don't go through life conducting Pier 4 brawls. Stay with us, Sports Weekend.
But what really bugs him?
I can't stand criticism. One bit.
Well, you're in the wrong business.
I know. But I can't stand criticism.
You gotta be kidding. You mean, I think half the things you say are a bunch of crap. And you're telling me you can't stand criticism?
I can't stand criticism, but what I do is
Somebody who dishes it out like you?
I take it where it comes from people like you. It doesn't bother me, left-wingers, see.
That's anyone who disagrees with Cherry, and there's the odd one around. But not tonight. He's back in a cubbyhole in Maple Leaf Gardens watching the game on TV and trying out the lines. He works all day on his diatribes, and it needs reassurance from co-anchor Ron McLean.
I say, what is this guy? Are you going to bring up him?
I don't know.
Oh, no, you don't know. You're not. Brian McClellan, 6'3", 215 pounds, doesn't like fighting. Can you imagine that? All I got to say is you, Brian, worry about yourself, get some goals, get some penalties. That sound good? And for Christmas, I hope you got a tennis racket so you can play 15 love. That sounds good, doesn't it?
You have to get hepped up for this when you go on.
Hey, there's 3 million people watching. 3 mil.
Well, I have to get a little wired, but I thought for you it came naturally.
No, it doesn't. Nothing comes naturally. It's all hard work.
That's an example how he talks. Now, obviously, he's a TV personality, so he's gonna exaggerate it, just like like anyone. But you can hear the difference how they talk and how the Canadian broad Canadian accent works out there. All right. This is just very quickly. Malay English. Malaysia was a colony of the UK for some time, and they are a heterogeneous society, as all the different islands have their own traditional cultures, and so English everybody learns English kind of thing. And they speak it in their own way, and the Malay accent of English is quite identifiable. And so, let's hear it.
Always we ask the question.
What is a national organization? Malaysia, but you never really left politics. You were still very much a dominant figure within the ruling United Malays National Organization, or UMNO as it's known locally. And it's essentially been the monopoly holder of government since Malaysia gained independence. In 2016, though, you resigned from UMNO and you set up your own party, announcing that you would contest the next elections, which you eventually ended up winning, surprisingly. What is it that made you decide to run again for office at the age of 92?
Well, when I stepped down in 2003, I had no intention of being in politics still. But after I stepped down and the new leader takes over, a lot of people came to see me.
you can hear how he talks. Of course, as they mentioned, he's 92 years old. So he talks like an old man, but you can hear in the pitch and the diction and the sing-song of it. That's, if you talk with Malays, especially, unless they have, they've worked to lose their Malay accented English, that's how they talk. It's a sing-song, a higher pitch than you find in other accents of English. Okay, and this is another example. This is from North America, the African American Vernacular English.
For so long, and it's not the end.
There's a lot of money in Memphis, and there's a lot of poverty. We have parts of South Memphis where whole streets and blocks are just vacant. It's like a war that people left due to some catastrophe, but it was just white flight and sprawl. And so what used to be a small family-owned grocery store is now a vacant building, and on one end of it they have a liquor store that's typical of South and North Memphis. Nobody is going to be attracted in terms of grocery stores, retail, to an area that is sparsely populated and looks and feels dangerous.
You can hear it a little bit, with how she talks, and especially how that last word, the dangerous, was dangerous. It's a bit of an example. If you go on news and in news interviews, you can find lots of more African American vernacular English. There's lots of variations within, just like there is with other accents, but it is a form of English we need to be able to hear. Rural West Virginia, there's lots more of accents, but this is just an introduction to different accents of English, and saying one's right, and the others are wrong is incorrect. Nobody owns English. The English don't own English. So saying that you have a bad pronunciation or a bad accent, only jerks and bullies would say that. What's important, as I hope has been a running theme in this class, has been, are you understandable? Can you be understood? And do you understand other people? That's the goal. That's the prize. How you talk, while it's important, it's much your Korean accent of English. Don't be ashamed of it, kind of thing. And you shouldn't be ashamed of it, and don't let somebody make fun of you for it either, because everybody speaks with an accent of some sort. Is ethnic, subcultural, subregional, regional. Education, people who've gone to university or gone to university in certain universities, they speak differently than people who haven't. So it's something to be aware of. All right, I hope that this was just an overall introduction to some different kinds of accents of English, and I'm excited to see you in class in person next time.